This is Eddie Weeks, Legislative Librarian to the Tennessee General Assembly, welcoming you to version 2.0 of this webinar, Authoritative Informational Resources in an Age of Social Media, or Does the Truth Matter Anymore? The Legislative Research Librarian Staff Section, in cooperation and co-sponsorship with the Research and Committee Staff Section of the National Conference of State Legislatures, has created this webinar in order to alert you to the dangers of misleading, fake, and even wrong information. We'll tell you how to evaluate a source of information, what to watch out for, and who you can trust. Your speakers today are Sabah El-Tareb of the California Research Bureau, Kristen Ford of the Idaho Legislative Reference Library.
Hello again.
And Tracy Kimball of the New Mexico Legislative Council Service.
Hi.
So, as I said before, we're at a point that even the old media call the age of new media. The Encyclopedia Britannica, perhaps the most trusted source of information for decades, has ceased publication. Reference sources, known for their years of accuracy and experience, are going out of business. We all rely on information, whether we're retrieving it, or using it to draft a bill, or gathering it for a research project, or compiling it into an audit. But now that information has become a commodity to be bought, sold, traded, and maybe even counterfeited. Researching an issue to many people now means the same thing as clicking a button. We've reached the point of equating a professionally done legislative audit with what we find on someone's blog. Sabah, I guess the first question is, what's the downside to all that?
You ask a good question, Eddie. Trusting that everything on the internet is reliable is just plain wrong. Getting published on the internet is quick, easy, and cheap, and there is little to no quality review for many of the pages that are on there. It's very easy to type a few words into a search box, get really excited to see so many items retrieved, and then get overwhelmed at the sheer number of items retrieved. We have to constantly judge information and resources. Google is the most popular search engine right now, yet it only indexes a small amount of resources on the internet. Items at the top of the list of pages retrieved when you run a search in Google and other search engines are based on a number of factors, including what you've searched for in the past, clicked on in the past, and oh yeah, what other websites may have tagged in their pages and or paid for in order to place higher on the list of items retrieved. There is no infrastructure on the entire internet that consistently reviews, fact-checks, cites sources, removes dated, wrong, or misleading information, or slaps warning labels on web pages. It is an information seeker beware. Seeking good, credible information takes time, especially on the internet. Not taking the time to evaluate the information we use to answer questions and to make public policy determinations reflects on our professionalism and may have profound implications in the legislative arena. Do you have anything to add, Tracy?
Well, one way to describe the program for desktop researchers is that there's a lot of zombie information out there. It's not genuine, but it may never die off the internet. And we need to be able to identify what's genuine and what's undead.
On the other hand, we now have social media. We can find out about news the instant that it happens. That's a good thing, right, Tracy?
Well, let's see. Here's a common definition of social media: forms of electronic communication where communities are created to share various things. And these are the platforms that we usually call social media. In June, a Twitter executive said there were more than 400 million tweets a day worldwide, and that's up from about 18% from the month before. In August, Facebook claimed over 870 million active monthly users. YouTube's website says 48 hours of video are uploaded every minute. That is 8 years worth every day, and it has hundreds of millions of users. That's a flood of information. But we don't know how much of it is true. For example, Tweets and Blogs reported that Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords died last year when she was shot at a local event in Arizona. In April this year, during a Pacific tsunami warning, a number of people posted videos on YouTube supposed to be the current tsunami hitting the coast of Sumatra. But the videos were from 2004, reposted with a new date.
Okay, social media may not be perfect, but once the dust settles, the correct information is left behind. It's like panning for gold. The stuff that's left over is the good stuff. I mean, no one's deliberately putting out fake information. Are they, Kristen?
Well, Eddie, earlier this year, Animal Planet aired a mockumentary in which two supposed NOAA scientists discover evidence of a mermaid skeleton. Even though the film was science fiction, it was convincing enough to spur calls to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which then posted an article on its website explaining that they don't have a mermaid science program and there are no mermaids. The show gave Animal Planet its best ever May ratings with 3.4 million viewers. With ratings like that, do you think they're likely to create more fake science shows? And this isn't just happening to gullible mermaid wanna-believers. There are any number of stories about the news media also being taken for a ride by fake stories. As one reporter states, technology hasn't made journalism any easier, or rather it hasn't made good journalism any easier. When every news outlet feels like it has to break stories before Twitter has the chance, a lot of corners get cut, specifically the corner called fact-checking. Another recent example is the story run in the online satiric news site The Onion. Most of us know that the news on The Onion is not real. I say most because I've taken a call myself from a little old lady who was very concerned about an article about the Idaho legislature that a friend had shown her from The Onion, not realizing it was a tongue-in-cheek publication. Recently, The Onion ran a story claiming that rural white Americans would prefer to go to a ball game with Iranian President Ahmadinejad over President Barack Obama. The Iranian news agency picked up the story and ran it as their own, not realizing it was a completely fake story invented by The Onion to amuse their readers. And even when websites are not technically fake, they could be misleading. I think we all know people that have been fooled by websites that are made to look real just to see who they can take in. This is an example on this slide here of a site which warns people of DHMO, which certainly can be dangerous. But while they advocate outlawing DHMO, it's clearly tongue-in-cheek since DHMO is, in fact, water.
Okay, so it's like vandalism. It's informational vandalism. Someone's making up fake information to find out who they can get to believe it. But it's just done for fun. There's nothing darker to it. Right, Tracy?
No, some of it can be harmful. You might think you're getting medical information from a reliable journal, but maybe it's just a marketing tool, like this journal from Merck, which is a long-standing publisher of medical and scientific information for health professionals. Or you might think that the studies published in scientific journals are reliable. But this study found that 43% of research articles that were published and later withdrawn had made up or manipulated data. The senior author of this study thinks that some scientists are motivated to be dishonest by grants, jobs, and awards they might get. False tweets were sent by hackers from a Reuters news account, and 10 days later, a false entry was made on their blog. Reuters suspects the hacking was done by Syrian government supporters. And tweets with false reports of violence in a Mexico City suburb caused widespread disruptions. Parents pulled their kids from school, businesses closed, and the police were sent out in force.
But still, it's just vandalism. No one is actually getting hurt by any of it. Are they, Sabah?
Yes, Eddie, people are getting hurt by this information vandalism. A 1998 study published in the Lancet Medical Journal by British gastroenterologist Andrew Wakefield linked childhood vaccines for measles, mumps, and rubella to autism. Over the past decade, dozens of peer-reviewed studies on millions of children have found no connection between vaccines and autism. And in 2010, the Lancet retracted his paper, and the UK's General Medical Council revoked his British medical license. Over the years, based on that 1998 study, legislative bodies have allowed for greater parental control over some vaccinations prescribed for their children, and the growing number of unvaccinated individuals is leading to an increase in diseases once thought to be eradicated, such as measles and smallpox. So what happens when grants, jobs, and prizes are given to scientists who publish the most in prestigious journals? Sure. Once the errors are discovered, retractions happen, eventually, in the more credible journals, and in the meantime, decisions may have been made based on that fake data. So what happens if fake information is posted to a resource that doesn't have such rigorous reviews and evaluations? In 2005, a fake biography of John Dingfelder Sr. was anonymously posted to Wikipedia, indicated that he had been directly involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. Dingfelder, a well-known American journalist, an aide and friend to Robert Kennedy, fought for months to clear his name and characterized the entry as internet character assassination. Libelous, hurtful, harassing. Yes, Eddie, people are getting hurt.
Okay, so there's fake information out there, deliberately misleading stuff designed to fool simple people. But we're professionals. We know what's real. We know what's right. We know who to trust. Right, Kristen?
Well, it's an interesting point to ponder. As legislative researchers and librarians, we have to be careful to remember that we are not above relying on convenient but perhaps less trustworthy sources. And who of all professionals would you expect to be the most conservative and careful in using online resources that may or may not be true, such as Wikipedia? Judges, perhaps? And yet, the increasing use of Wikipedia by judges in their official opinions has been fascinating to observers and students of the law and library science alike. Several studies show increasing citations to Wikipedia in court opinions. I counted 28 citations in state appellate cases so far just in 2012. And while opinions vary as to the amount of trust the judges are placing in Wikipedia, it's a compelling trend all the same. I searched the Idaho appellate opinions, and it appears that while our judges have not yet cited to Wikipedia, surprisingly our equally conservative neighbor Utah has. And in an opinion 2 months ago, their Court of Appeals spent almost more time discussing their use of Wikipedia than they did on the rest of the case. In this case, the judges were considering what was meant by the term jet ski in an insurance contract. Was it only the Kawasaki brand jet ski? Was it any brand? Did it include the stand-up and sit-down variety? The judges decided that Wikipedia was the place to turn in order to see what the common man understands the term to mean. The lengthy footnote shown in this slide regarding Wikipedia was in the main opinion, but the concurring opinion discussing the use of Wikipedia was 5 pages long, longer than the rest of the main opinion. Interestingly enough, the Westlaw headnotes to this case make no mention of Wikipedia, other than just a generic reference to secondary sources. So it appears to me that the Westlaw case law editors are a little more conservative than judges in embracing Wikipedia.
Well, we have to believe what we read. Okay, surely the government will stop anyone from producing and publicizing fake information. They will, won't they, Kristen?
You know, this question makes me think of a conversation that a colleague of mine had with a visitor from an Eastern European country that was formerly in the Soviet Union. They were discussing shows like Worldwide Wrestling and other shows that are staged or faked. And the visitor asked, but why does the government allow that? Which kind of took us both aback a little bit, because while most of us don't hold false statements in high regard, still the strength of the First Amendment in this country extends even to false statements as well. There are some exceptions, such as fraud, defamation, perjury, posing as a government official. But recently, a big ruling came out. Over the last few years, a federal act called the Stolen Valor Act has been litigated in the courts. The Stolen Valor Act makes it illegal to falsely represent that you have received a military medal or decoration. And there have been a number of cases where people have been prosecuted for claiming to be veterans with Congressional Medals of Honor or the like. So several of these cases have been appealed up through the courts on up into the U.S. Circuit Courts, and those circuit courts reached different conclusions. So the U.S. Supreme Court last year agreed to hear the case, and a few months ago they came out with their decision. It was a very divided U.S. Supreme Court, but they held that the Stolen Valor Act was unconstitutional for infringing on the First Amendment. While some of the justices felt that false speech such as this did not deserve First Amendment protection, a majority held that the proper remedy for misinformation such as this is to put correct information out there to compete with it. So that gets us a lot of additional information, but it doesn't really do a lot of help in winnowing out the incorrect information.
Okay, so there's fake information out there being professionally produced, designed to fool us, from fake sources to real sources with fake content, to using the first source we find to get the quickest answer we can. So I guess the next question is, Tracy, what do we do?
Well, we can try to trust but verify. As we've seen, desktop research isn't like going into a library and using sources that have already been screened for reliability. We have to be our own fact checkers. But there is some help available, including some sites aimed especially at social media. Snopes.com, for example, is the oldest site to report on internet and email hoaxes, like those scary stories about gang initiations or offers from Nigerian bankers. Factcheck.org is focused on claims made in U.S. politics. You can find lots of other sites with an internet search that looks for internet hoaxes or similar topics. But remember that it's also our advice to use more than one search engine. And as reporters know, sometimes the best check is to call the source.
But how can we tell a good reference source from one that's not so good? Any ideas, Tracy?
Well, without blushing, I recommend that researchers check out the advice available from librarians. And remember that we'll provide a document that has all these links available once the webinar is archived. So I'll go through some examples quickly. The University of California at Berkeley has a good page of suggestions for evaluating web pages. So does the State University of New York at Albany. And Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore has a page devoted to evaluating social media.
Okay then, but going back to the title of this little webinar, what are authoritative informational resources? What do you think, Sabah?
Okay, so some sources are easier to recognize as credible, providing sound information, and others perhaps are a little more suspect. Who would you trust more? Something from CBS News? Or perhaps the National Enquirer? Which review is more objective and even-handed? One from Consumer Reports or StateNet TV? Which would provide a more unbiased book review? Publishers Weekly or Amazon? And so what if that book review in Amazon is not from a true consumer sharing his or her opinion, but actually was paid to do so and to provide positive, glowing reviews for a number of items? Anything to add, Tracy?
Well, our panel agrees on this hierarchy of sources that we trust for desktop research. NCSL, of course, and the Council of State Governments, which has a lot of their briefs collected in their Knowledge Center, and of course, state and congressional legislative research offices. Next, federal and state government sites. Next, professional associations and academic sites. Next, think tanks. And, you know, take a look around. Your state library or other local libraries might subscribe to research databases that they make available to you. Oh, and there's even a program at the University of Pennsylvania that enlists over 1,500 experts and institutions to rank think tanks in the U.S. and other countries.
Well, is there some sort of test you can use to determine reliability? I mean, how do you know if something's good or if it's just crap, Tracy?
Well, if you're uncertain about a website or a report, you can see how it does on the CRAP test. That is, check currency, reliability, authority, and purpose supportive view. This is another guide put together by librarians, and I'd like to go through it with a couple of examples. It's usually easy to see when a report was published, looking at currency. Most have a date right there on the title page or the first 2 or 3 pages. But here's one that has no publication date anywhere in the document. So the simplest thing is to call or email the publishing organization. But if they don't respond on your timeline, you need other approaches. This organization didn't have a convenient news release about the study on its website either. And a general internet search on the title, as a phrase, didn't find any news stories about the study. But it was listed in the bibliographies of several other stories. Those bibliographies agreed that it was published in 2007. And is a 5-year-old study current enough? That's up to you. For reliability, we usually check by looking for a description of how the study was performed and put together, and also by looking at their references and sources used. We measure the report's authority by what we know or can find out about the organization that publishes it and about the authors themselves. To check out these authors, I looked in the report and on the organization's website but didn't find anything. I did find background information for one of the authors with a general internet search at the website for his consulting group. And also in the small print on the bottom, it shows the funding sources for the grant that funded this report and gives another hint as to whether or not this is a mainstream study. Let's switch to tax information. We've all seen reports that give our home state wildly different rankings on tax issues, so it's important to know where these guys are coming from. A responsible website tells us something about the organization on a page that's about them or their mission. So these 2 organizations both tell us that they're research groups, and you can see that the Tax Foundation was founded by business executives and represents a business perspective, while Citizens for Tax Justice advocates closing business tax loopholes and wants fair taxes for middle and low-income families. So the CRAP test can tell us a lot about an unfamiliar document or information resource, and we have a more informed choice about whether or how to use the information.
Well, is there anything else we can do, Kristen?
Well, when it comes to general internet searching, I would definitely agree with Tracy's advice to trust and verify with a heavy emphasis on verify. I mean, what would we do without Google? Even I can't imagine that anymore. But you still need to always carefully evaluate your search results. So on this slide, for example, I just have a search result page, and you can eliminate some sources just by looking at the web addresses. Others merit clicking on, but even then view everything with skepticism. This Berkeley posting at the bottom, for example, turned out to actually be work from a Washington, D.C. lobbying organization, not an academic study. So that makes it drop down the rung of reliability in my view. And especially when it comes to researching law, if possible, always start with the traditional big 2 legal databases, Lexis and Westlaw. They're great if you're a subscriber and if your topic is one which they have materials on. But I really always recommend going directly to the source if at all possible. It's tempting to go by, a state compilation law that you might find on through a Google internet search. But those can blow up in your face if this is someone that's just put something fake out there. So I'm just going to run through a couple of go-to websites in my viewpoint, because every librarian has their own favorite go-tos. And as Tracy mentioned, these sites are going to be available on the archived version of this webinar. But for federal legislation, I go right to the Library of Congress's useful site, Thomas. For federal cases, there's several sites that I've been using for years and have confidence in. Those are listed there. And not everyone realizes that the Law Library of Congress also has some useful overviews of legal topics. It's not a huge number, but if the topic happens to be the one that you're researching on, that is a great jump start also for your research. Same with the Congressional Research Service reports. You might also check to see if they've done a recent report on your topic, because these reports are also really well researched. Now, they don't provide their reports online to the public, but there are a couple of websites that do collect the reports as they manage to get hold of them, and then they publish them for free on the website. So there's a couple of sites on this slide here that you can try and see if a report is done that will help you with your research. And then moving from federal resources to the state level of law and policy, it's a good idea to check our own NCSL's databases. Not only do they provide nice overviews of hot or not topics, but you can also find sample legislation on pressing topics of the day. You can keyword search, or you can check off entire subjects to pull up collections that might be helpful to you. But even with a trusted source like NCSL, pay close attention to the detail. Is this a compilation of legislation on a topic that is not necessarily passed? Are these bills or are these statutes? How recent is the information? Are statutory citations provided so that you can verify the information for yourself? I always check on those. And then NCSL also has a bill searching service through StateNet. This can be a useful source, especially for resolutions or memorials that aren't codified. And NCSL regularly offers free training sessions on using this bill search database. You should note that the default setting is to search the current year's legislation only, but you can select Legislation Archive if you want to search previous years as well. And then while I think a lot of people know about the bill search database and the compilations of legislation on various topics, I don't think as many people are aware that NCSL also collects research reports from state researchers like ourselves. I know that on multiple occasions, states like Connecticut have really helped me out by providing me with information that includes multi-state law citations. There's also a similar database of program evaluation reports from the different states on this site, and that database actually contains even more states than the legislative reports do. So these program evaluations also sometimes contain a comparison of state laws on a topic, which is usually what I'm looking for.
Well, perhaps the first step we can take is to provide a webinar to make people aware of fake information and fake resources and the importance of using authoritative informational resources. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that you have enjoyed this webinar, Authoritative Informational Resources in an Age of Social Media, or Does the Truth Matter Anymore? Please join me in thanking our speakers, Sabah El-Tareb, Kristen Ford, and Tracy Kimball. In an age of social media, there are informational resources, both authoritative and fake. The truth still matters, but it may be very difficult to find. Searching one source or typing one search into Google may give you the exact answer that you want, but not necessarily give you the truth. As librarians, as researchers, as legislative staff, we have an obligation to the truth, to using authoritative sources, and to teaching others how and why to use them. We are bombarded daily with fake information and unreliable sources of information. Professionals of all walks of life get fooled by these fakes, and we all get seduced into using quick sources, regardless of their worth. We must verify information, and we must verify the sources of information. And we must do these things because the one source that we must all be able to trust is each other. A research project is only as good as the data that goes into it, as is a drafted bill. An audit is only as good as the research behind it, and the worth of a librarian is determined by the reference sources used. We must be able to trust each other's final work product, and that can only be accomplished if we all know what to use. And if you're still uncertain, you can always ask a librarian. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Legislative Research Librarian Staff Section, in cooperation and co-sponsorship with the Research and Committee Staff Section, of the National Conference of State Legislatures, thank you for your time. Our infinite conferencing moderator will now instruct you on how to ask a question of our wonderful panel.
Thank you. The floor is now open for questions. If you do have a question, please press *1 on your telephone keypad at this time. You may also use the chat box located on the lower right-hand side of your screen. Simply type your message into the box and click on the send button. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you do have a question, please press *1 on your telephone keypad or use the chat box located on the lower right-hand side of your screen. Please hold while we poll for questions.
Okay, we have our first question popping up. Do you feel that electronic publications are equally trustworthy as print publications? Oh, well, my first thought would be not yet, but they're getting there. More and more print publications are becoming electronic publications. It's up to them to prove that they still have the same level of trustworthiness. Newsweek, look at Newsweek. They've gone to an electronic version only. There's no longer a print edition of Newsweek. Are you still going to trust them? We've had another question pop up. Which other search engines do you suggest? Tracy, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I've looked at some reviews, particularly on these library websites, and generally Google and Yahoo were the top two contenders. University at Berkeley suggested one called ExaLead, which I tried and actually didn't have much success for. So you really just need to, test out some of these things. You can do an internet search for search engine reviews. Some people like Bing. Other people think Yahoo is good for shopping and travel. But, when you have a little time, do some searches that are you're going to carry over from one engine to the other and compare the results.
We've had another question about the GPO, the Government Printing Office. What is your opinion of the offerings to date? I specifically want to find the most recent information that I can find. Kristen, do you want to speak to that one? Kristen? Sabah, would you like to speak to that one?
I haven't actually used the federal GPO digital system, and so I can't address that specifically at this point. It's a good one to bring to our attention, and it will certainly be on my list of things to evaluate.
I've used gpo.gov many times. It's wonderful when what you're looking for is there. I mean, it's the same answer that it is to so many different things. You're hoping for the one thing to be there. When it's there, it's a brilliant source. When what you're looking for is not there, you no longer trust it.
Or you go to your secondary choice.
Exactly. Just straight down the line. Tracy, did you have any thoughts about the electronic versus print issue?
Well, I was surprised to see a 2005 study published in Nature magazine, both in print and online, which looked at 42 scientific articles, each in Wikipedia and the Encyclopedia Britannica. The study found that both had numerous errors, an average of 3 errors per article in the Britannica, compared with 4 per article in Wikipedia. So that scares me into wondering if the standard of trustworthiness may be going down and not up.
It's a little scary, isn't it?
Watch out for zombie information.
Okay, it looks like we're just about out of time here. Oh, we did. Hold on one moment, please. There's the think tank evaluation slide. Tracy, I believe that one was yours. You want to speak on that one?
Right. Actually, I was alerted to it by Sabah, and this is a very large document that does rankings in a lot of different ways. They do international rankings. They'll explain to you what their methodology is. You can go through the CRAP test and I think be completely satisfied with this report. And take a look at ones you may be used to using, or use it for suggestions about other places you might be looking.
We've had another question pop up. Is there any move on the internet to date things, to put dates on documents? To my knowledge, no. And as the questioner points out, the government does a horrible job of dating their own items, and it is frustrating. It's like Tracy mentioned in her part of the presentation of where the video was used from 2004 and claimed to be a 2011 video. That's happening all the time in all places on the internet.
And even when a page has been updated or a document has been updated, it's hard to tell whether the entire document has been or only something very minute that wouldn't lend to it truly being updated.
Exactly. Okay, it does look like we are out of time. A final thank you to our speakers for their incredible work. There will be additional information, including internet links to documents contained in this webinar, available on NCSL's website, along with an archived version of this webinar. And lastly, thank you again for your time and attention. You may now disconnect from this webinar.